Welcome to UI5ers Live, the webcast where we bring you what's new from OpenUI5 and sap.ui.5. I'm Margot Wolny and this is episode 58. Here's what's on today. First, Holger Schäfer from our community has built a drop-in replacement for JSONModel that uses Claude as a native bindable source. Then Peter Muessig on the removal of the WebC libraries on 4147. They shipped as experimental. The experiment is now concluded, and Peter will show you what to use instead. And also Andreas Kunz is here for the discussion, and we'd love you to join too. So if you have any questions or any thoughts you want to share with us, drop it in to the chat as we go. But now on the good stuff, and Holger.
Well, hi again, community. And today I want to share something we did internally for playing around with the ClaudeJSONModel. And this is something I also made it public on my GitHub repo so that you can later on play around with yourself with this stuff. So let's get started. So what is it? The idea was working with Claude AI natively. There's in general something where you start, where you will use a regular fetch to get this kind of data. Then you can use your API key to get data back from Claude, and then you will handle the output result the manual way. And from my point, I was thinking maybe it could be a little bit more clever and nicer to be used, and to use it more the JSON, the UI5, the JSON model way. And for this reason, I thought about, so how can this be handled? And I came up to the idea, so why not using just an extension on top of the existing JSON model, so called it ClaudeJSONModel. And the idea was there to hide something of the complexity from the user of this model. So all this kind with the fetch and all the other things should be done in the model itself so that the user can just concentrate on the important parts. This is in this case the user prompt we can see on the right side, so that we have the in general a user prompt. We can get passed through some data, can be binded to existing view data, but it can also be included here inline in these params. And we can define some output example. This would be in this case an array, an object, where you can find the results that you would like back from your Claude call. And then there's also a section on the right side. You can see it's not below the code for viewable reason. You can add also some constraints so that the data, in this case, the impact effort will be rounded to numeric stuff later on with the mapper. And that's at the end, that's it, what you need to define your own prompt. And then Claude API will be called under the hood automatically for you. And the response will be then automatically passed and concerned your needs. It will be handled as a JSON object so that you can directly bind it to your view as regularly. But you can also tell him it should be returned as a plain text. Or you will get back Markdown, because mostly the Claude can also respond information in a Markdown way. And for this reason, the model also has a nice helper for you so that you can nicely show Markdown in a dialog, because currently Markdown is not part of the UI5. To be able to call this functionality, I will shortly switch over to the coding section. So we go to VS Code to see how this, so what you have to do and how this is handled. You can see here, first of all, we need an API key. So if you go to your Attrapel console, there's the possibility to create an API key for you. So, and this should be this one was starting with SK-end. So it should be handled a little bit safely, that no other is able to use your API key and use your cost and token to call the Claude. It would be possible to use this API key even from the browser side, but in general, this is a bad idea because then anybody who's calling this stuff can see it in the browser. And especially working with AI tools, also .env is maybe a bad idea. So in this case, generally, you have to export your API key to the environment, and then the environment can access it and use it. So it can be used by your services, but it's not visible with a file inside your project folder. So to use these services directly in UI5, there's a UI5 middleware added to it. It's the Claude proxy middleware here. In generally, some 2 additional properties that will be passed through the underlying middleware. It's the Anthropic version. And the second one is a little bit also more important here, because there's a scenario where also MCP tooling will be called. For this reason, I used Marian Zeiss MCP SAP Docs server, and to be able to call toolings, normally you would do this server-sidely, but with this beta feature, you can use Claude directly so that it can handle tooling calls if they are public, and you will directly get the results. That's the nice part about this beta feature. It works quite well for you. The proxy itself is just not something magic. It's just the part that you do not call the corresponding middleware from browser side. So you'll have your endpoint, and then this proxy will be then called from directly from a coding server side layer, and that's it. It's just meant for development stuff, so it's not meant here for productive usage in this case. So it's just the middleware so that you can run it locally, can bring your key to your environment, and then that's the stuff you can start. And only what you need is call your start script, and then you are ready to go. So let's see what we can do with this layer. I will switch back. And for this case, I prepared some use cases. The first, in this case, also put in something to test for the light and dark mode, because also the Markdown renderer that's used needs to be tested a little bit for both versions, because it catches also CSS for both styles. And also at the end, you have here this the language selector, because if you call it with German or English labels, just did not only check or change the translation labels here, because the local will be also sent to Claude so that you get your response exactly the way, and the language translated to the selected target language. We have some kind of wizard toolings here using some card layout. In this case, we have some example for a use case. For each example, you can use, okay, I will select industry, in this case automotive. Maybe optionally you can enter some focus here. And then you can Spark. Spark is our internal coding name for the things we are doing with AI in this case. So what we got 3 results with this call, and nicely presented here with the general view binding. What is happening? There's a prompt inspector part of this model that can be easily used. So you will see the model is using a model ID internally called use cases, because generally you would use a model for a single instance. But then we figured out, playing around with Claude, it's sometimes nice to have just the first call, and then you will have maybe a deep call on details. And for this reason, you can use just a model ID, and the prompt inspector will show all the calls separately concerning the model ID. And we will see it later on with a deep call, so that we have both things side by side. The system itself generates a system prompt for you as shown in the example stream, but later on I will show this again. So that it takes care on all the things that is necessary so that Claude returns your data the way you are expecting it. So you, in this case, it should reply with valid JSON, no markdown. There should be used compact JSON white space. So it handles all this stuff. It also optimizes the system query a little bit so that there's a less usage of tokens and all some things that maybe the one who is using this does not know at this point, but anyhow, the model is taking care on this. We also have defined an output structure. In the code, we can use just an array and a JSON object, but here this output structure will be flattened just to a string because it uses less input token in this case. Also some kind of constraints in the code, there will be defined as an object, but here you see it's also just written down to text because also in this case less token. The only thing what the developer has to do, he has to define his user prompt. As you have seen in the example format in the screen, there are some placeholders in the user prompt, and the placeholders will then just replaced here with this UI where you selected your automotive industry. And you can see the result JSON here in this case, that this is then, the result will be automatically binded in the JSON model, then below /use cases /data, and then you can just bind it from your UI side. There's also something like state management, if it's loading also, and you can use this. We have seen this, there's a loading busy indication here while you catch some data, and we are calling this stuff. Below you will see the currently used models over and the max tokens that are used for initializing the model, so to restrict a little bit the costs. You will see the in and out token stuff, and there's also calculation so that you get a feeling what does it cost for you. So in this case it's $0.00528. And also on top of it, there will be, before the theme switcher, there's also the cost section where you can see, if you do multiple calls, then you will see also the aggregated cost of the session. The response output shows you what comes from the Claude call. And you will see also that the token usage is part of it. So that is the stuff that is used for calculating the costs. And here you see there's something in between as a text and the content. In this case, we get escaped the JSON object, but you don't have to care. The model takes care for you and it's automatically passed and you can directly use it this way. Now I want to go a deep dive. So now we get a dialog here popping up. Still in the busy state, so the Claude call is running in the back end. And now we will see, we get some pre-formatted stuff here. So now we have this dialog here we can use and have a nice viewer for viewing Markdown. Because it's nice because in some cases we get some ASCII art-oriented diagrams or whatever generated from the Claude so that we can nicely, and it's better readable than just the plain text to be returned. And with this dialog, you can directly use the result and show it as a Markdown dialog. Also here we can see we have another call. It's the deep dive call here. The system prompt is generally generated automatically in the coding section. The user just has to take care, create a structured deep dive for the use case, some descriptions, again, a placeholder for the section that came, and you described your outline, also return a max words. Also, the text in and out stuff will be counted here that concerning your max token. This variable will be calculated depending on your language. There's some factors, so if the token size is greater in German or English, so that will be handled here, that you have this stuff. And now you see on the right side, you will get plain Markdown as a result. And again, the response will show it for you. So that's the idea, and so that you get a little bit more what you can do with it. There are some additional examples. In this case, I'm using the MCP SAP Docs server for Maria and Zeiss that is publicly available. And we can use it to just call here the tooling set with a question that should be passed through his tool so that he can have a look at his indexed data for the results, or maybe live requests. And now we get all these questions forwarded using his tooling set and can directly output the result. We see also some links. If I click on it, he also returns directly the links to the target content. So from this point, you can nicely open it. And here you can see search documentation, use the SAP Docs search tool with these parameters. This K variable is there that you will see only 3 results or 5 or 10 or whatever, include online samples. This is generally the API interface of his tooling set that can be directly passed through so that we just get back this kind of data. And that's the idea behind. What you also can do is you can use the vision layer of Claude, for example. For this reason here, there's a small implementation. Let's have a look, where's my picture so far. So in this case, you can upload a picture and then Claude Vision will handle the picture for you. I choose some language results, of which I want to have German and English. And then you can see at the end, what happens is just there's a placeholder for the image prompt that will be part of the Claude call for the vision section, and then describe this image in the following language because you selected English and German for it. And then you will get what Claude Vision sees inside the picture. So you will see the German and the English text. I did something like this a year ago. I put this kind of calls into a CAP attachment plugin. So when you upload this kind of pictures and for web content manager or whatever, and you have some accessibility stuff where someone wants to, the redacteurs normally do not use so much content or metadata version down for such kind of images. Now you can just upload the image and you will get a nicely described text of your image concerning the stuff you did. Under the hood, also the image will be in the browser, it will be resized, so it uses internally Canvas, it loads up the picture. The reason for this is docking costs. In this case, you see there's a low, medium, and high section, and exactly so approximately the costs for this stuff. That means if you have a low picture where you just need small data for it, then you can use the low version, and it resizes this image to it. But if you have a picture with a lot of text, or at least a picture where a lot of text is in, then you have to choose the high-end version here to have a big picture. And you will see, the higher the result, the quality is, that the more text you will get as metadata back from the Claude service call, so that even the mini text will be recognizable for him so that he can get back this data for you. And in this case, the costs does also converted it to WebP, but the costs are not coming from the size of the picture. It's just the pixel aspect. So that's the part that influences the costs, not the length of the data that is used with this service. Again, let's have a look into the coding to see in live how this will be handled. Examples. The package itself is quite plain. We have this ClaudeJSONModel with all the magic stuff in it. But let's see the controller, for example. We have this use case controller. So at the end, what you generally need is you have to instantiate your model. And with this max tokens, there's a data section that is generally the UI view layer, because at the end I figured out it's quite nice not to have an additional JSON model just for view bindings. So here you can use it for your view bindings, and then you could put in your select boxes with these fields directly so you can easily access it. The model comes with some view-like helper functions for you, Because if you create new assistant things directly with Claude or with artifacts, generally everything is done reactively and not on the view level. And for this reason, you can watch the selected industry field here in your view model. So if you have your combo box and change things, and at least if you selected one value, then a property ready Boolean will be set, and then this ready can be used for the button so that you can fire the call. And you do not have to handle like on live change, on edit change or something like this in the view. You can just do it the programmatic way with this watch or stuff on the coding section. The generated stuff, the same approach. You have to say, I want to set my prompt here. In this case, you have enter your unified model ID. You can then use your prompt. And you have some kind of placeholders where you can reference here just selected stuff you put on the UI to make it easy for the user to select things. And you also have this kind of params that are coming here from the param section. It looks a little bit like the regular binding, but at the end, I figured out that the binding itself is not be able to be used directly by API. So I need to handle this a little bit manually, but I decided to use the same syntax we know from view binding. But at the end, sadly, you cannot use expression bindings for this example because there's no API so that I can pass in the view context and some text to it so that you would be able to handle it this way. So we see the output example, we see the constraints and the mapper, and that's it. And then just starting the prompt will automatically start. Always it's a promise. The same stuff for the deep dives. So you can use the model show dialog. You have just a handle to the view that you get the dependency stuff. And the content itself can be just a set prompt. And the content itself can be a promise. So in this case, the dialog will be shown as a promise, and then also it will be called a set prompt for you. And if the data comes back in the response type marked down, it will be directly formatted and shown internally with the stuff. And here below the on-show prompt is just a small helper so that you have this tech dialog. We have seen that you can analyze your prompt and all this stuff so that it just renders this dialog box on top of you. The only thing what is a little bit different is here. So if you're talking about using MCP servers as toolings, you have the possibility to add an array of MCP servers that are publicly available. In this case, it's the public URL for Marian size MCP with the name of SAP Docs. Everything else is working the same way. So you have the input, you have the output example. So you can define what you will expect back from the stuff. You can also have the deep dive here with this show dialog thing so that you will get back this data as marked down. So everything much similar. And the vision examples also something like this. There's some kind of options. And there's a helper for the file change stuff, so the image will be internally read as base for 64. This way it will be also passed through to Claude and internally resized concerning the quality sizing options. And then finally, you just have your own visualize, so you have your prompt and you have a handle for your image. And that's it, you expand your result awaited output example stuff, and then it will do all this stuff even with this image, but it will work the same way with other files if you have text files or will do anything else so that are supported by Vision, then you can use it and call it the same way. From the feature section, so what we got from with this kind of model is you have the state call handled internally, you have the output result handling for JSON, text and markdown. You can use set prompt with an ID, so you have multiple instances with one model. The output shading takes care that your output example will be automatically handled and formatted this way that you can directly bind it in your views. You have this kind of tooling support. You have some helper like this watching stuff, the vision things. You have this debugger tooling in it, the language detection, all this stuff. So all these things is just put it into this ClaudeJSON model. and makes it a little bit easier to get started with these things and use it a little bit more the native UI5 way, like working with OData. So to have this kind of model, and if someone will have some fun with it. So for this reason, I put it here. Margaret maybe can share this link here to the chat for you. So this public available, and you can give it a try if you want to play around a little bit with it. That's it.
Very nice. Thank you, Holger. Yeah, I think that was quite fast, right? But as you said, you published it on GitHub so people can have a look at it. And you mentioned that often Marian Zeiss. I guess we should have maybe a follow-up on his MDC there to bridge this then. I don't know.
You mean the MCP? I just want to add one thing, because also I got heavily inspired by all the things you were doing, Holger, and we exchanged a bit also in chats about doing things here and there. What I really liked about is how you use at the end the whole thing on the client side, that you predefine at the end the result you expect from the model, and then you give this together with a system prompt as more or less the harness to your LLM at the end, together with the user prompt, which then defines what exactly is necessary, and then it returns it exactly that way how you need it. So you get the data in that way that you can just plug it into the JSON model, and then this is used at the end to really render your content into the screen. So this overall, this looks really neat, and I really like that. And for sure, it can be done differently. There are other approaches around, also with more generic UI responses, but I think on that way, this goes even beyond that. But this, what you have done here is really great stuff to inspire us to do even more with that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess as we are running here out of time, we should really go to the next topic, Peter.
That's my starting point now, exactly. Running out of time. No, I think we have still a bit, and it should be enough today for that topic, because I think many of you have also read already the blog post about that in the past. So I just thought it would be also good to bring it up to the UI5ers live. We talk again about the topic about the removal of the sap.ui.webc Web Components being built into the UI5 distribution, SAP UI5 distribution, because with that, we had some problems, and I want to also quickly talk about that and again repeat how we recommend the consumption of web components today in SAP UI5. And therefore, I decided to bring in this topic to this UI5ers live session to really make you all aware of that, and that's also in a video form available to you in the community. So goodbye to the old web component integration, Hello Native Web Components, because this was also a topic which were driving us in the past to make this possible, that we can integrate our UI5 web components and also other web components natively in SAP UI5. Therefore, with SAP UI5 1.38, I also mentioned it last year at the UI5 Con, we integrated a new base class called sap UI.core.webc Web Component, which can be used to integrate web components natively, or into the native web components into the SAP UI5 rendering lifecycle and data binding framework and stuff like that, so that they can be used like UI5 controls in there. And with all that and what we have done over the couple of last months and to last year, we decided at some point in time that with the existing solution of this SAP UI.webc integrated web components, it's time to get rid of them. So not just from a history perspective, so it was quite a journey. We started in 192 with an experiment of that, so experimental drop of this SAP UI.webc web components. We deprecated it then in 120 because we thought this is not the way forward, but we didn't have really a full representation or replacement for that, and therefore we worked hard on this native support to get that done, so that 147 now we decided to really remove these packages out of that, because they never were not experimental. They always were in a very early stage. This SAP UI.webc web components, they were not really actively used, only for experiments, and then also with the deprecation early stage we got rid of that. And why did we do that? To just explain it a little bit more, because with the integration of these components, web components into our delivery, we had a tight coupling to a version, to a specific version, version 1.18. And if you follow the release cycle of the web components, they are in the meantime at 2.22.0 version. So they are making really progress. And there was even a major version change in between when we introduced the TypeScript support for the web components. And therefore, this didn't really follow up properly. And we couldn't really make this keeping up with the pace of the web components. Therefore, we decided that we want to have a more easier way to consume third party in general, so that you are able to consume it with a dedicated version you decide, and that's the thing that you can consume then now with the NPM packages directly and using the UI5 tooling modules to do that bridge. But I showed it also later on how that looks like. But most of you may know that. I just do that for completeness here in that round. And here in this old library, we had to do a lot of hand work to do the wrappers, and now this is really generated what we have done. Because the framework base class takes care about of a lot of integration aspects, that it works with data binding, that it works in the XML view, that it works in the rendering lifecycle and stuff like that. So the layer of the web components is more a really thin layer at the end, which can be really generated easily, and that's also one of the benefits for the whole thing. So, and with that, we said it's very easy today, so I want to also show that quickly to you how that looks like. So you can, in your project, so I have the project also available here. So this is a UI5 TypeScript project behind the scenes. You can very easily install the web components into an existing project. So the first thing you should do is to install the UI5 tooling modules, but there has also been an extension to that, and I just need to also add that quickly here, that you can also use this register tooling extension -RTE flag, and then you can specify also, thanks to Marian Zeiss, I think he was it, who did that, that you are able to specify the YAML files to which the configuration for UI5 tooling module should be added. Since quite a while, and you have seen or heard about this mini-Shai-Hulud attacks, the post-install scripts may not run without explicit enablement. Therefore, because this is a post-install script which runs then, you can say ignore scripts false in that command, and then the post-install script of UI5 tooling modules is running for that. If you don't trust in that, just add the configuration manually into UI5 YAML, but it's just an easy way of doing that. So the warnings we need to clean up in the future, and there will be also something that this -RTE option may not work with NPM 12, so maybe there is something we need to look into to get that fixed. So when running that, and maybe then to show that quickly, this adds now in the UI5 YAML the entries, and it sorts them in properly so that it says it needs to run after the transpile middleware in order to run properly. So it takes care for the ordering. Also the task has been added here on top after the transpile task. So as a next step, when I want to use the web component, I install the web components package from NPM. Very easy, just as it is, as a normal dependency of the project. And with this, I will have then the package available, and I can immediately then consume in UI5 with UI5 tooling modules third-party packages like that. But I need to first start the project, that you can maybe quickly see that. Takes a bit. My machine is slow today, a bit sleepy. Maybe next time I do a restart up front. And now we should be able to see this sample application. So this is TypeScript Hello World application we generate with the easy UI5 Yeoman generator. What instead I want to do, I want to place below that button the web components button. So let's go into the view, into the main view. And as you remember, you can now use the web component NPM package name here to specify you want to use it. And I know the web components under this subpath, so I do that in like that. And here I use now a VBox. And in the VBox, I put the buttons underneath each other. So let's keep the original button. And I put now the button from the web components inside. So with a namespace, Let's copy that part here and reuse that. Oops. Let's do that. Let's give it a name WebC. And here we know that the press event is the click event here for the web component. So let's rename that. And with that, I should now see in a second the button. So here in the background, you see that here build is running. It's generating the web components wrappers for you. And once done, this goes through really quickly. Then you see now here is the classic button and here's the web components button underneath. So in order to really prove that this is the case, let's take quickly a look into the DOM. And here you see this is the UI5 button tag. It's using scoping in order that if you have multiple different versions of web components used in different projects, that there will be no conflicts and that they're using running seamlessly side by side. But I want to really also show you one other thing, because maybe one thing as a lab preview from that what we have done. We enabled also TypeScript support for the web components wrappers, because if you now want to use the web component here inside and you look for the button here, then there is no web components button available. So as this is a lab preview, I need to drop a bit of configuration in. It's specified and documented for sure also on the UI5 tooling module. So this goes into the UI5 tooling module configuration here in the middleware, because we are using that for the middleware itself. And with a plugin option web component skip DTS generation false, we are enabling now the DTS generation for that file. So I want to rerun the generation, so I delete this folder. There could be the tooling could learn that if the configuration changes, that it really also runs the regeneration, something on the plate to do. But now with that, so we don't see anything cool here, but let's look into that. In the UI5 tooling modules, now in the types folder underneath, we see that here for the web components, a lot of types are generated here by that. And these are the types for all the things which are related to that import. And now when you look into that, you can also use the type for the web components button when I find it properly. Oh, where is it? Last time it was better visible. Okay, let's do it differently. Const button, import button, show effect. Here you see already the web components thingies are in. Too many buttons. I hate it. Let's do it like that. We need to import the button from here. It could be, I know what it could be as well. Let's restart the ESLint. So for sure, this happens. Let's give it a try again. So here, now it is here. You see the UI5 Web Components button is there. So after restarting the ESLint stuff, then I don't know sometimes how this is related to that, but I will look into that a little bit more. But with that, you can now also use the type completion for that. You have access to properties here inside. From the button. Let's use the comma here. And you see there are all the properties available, like you know that from the UI5 controls. They are also available now for the web components here inside. And at the end, this is what I wanted to show quickly on that. There are two links where you can find more information about that. One is the blog post you may know. I drop it also in the chat, or you can scan the QR code here. And the other thing is our documentation has been updated recently for the web components, because there were also some things not properly up to date, and this has been also now modernized thanks to the colleagues here in the team looking into that, who also added then the hints for the ignore script false and stuff like that, and how to use that whole tooling in that way a bit better.
I think it was really good also that you mentioned that in the documentation that we updated there, where you can find additional information, as we could see that some people had some issues with moving to the new concept. And
I think it was worth to mention it here, so that we are we talked about that.
There's a comment from Marco, HMR hot reload on config change.
What module reload is it? Yeah, I just read that. Yeah. The question was from Marco whether now I wonder if it supported hot module reload on config change. Since you mentioned it for the UI5 tooling modules or the UI5 tooling config changes in general, yeah, for sure. Things like that we make this a little bit more easier. But hot module reload, I didn't look into that indeed. That's maybe something to investigate a bit more, whether we can do that. But let's see, yeah. Indeed, a few things like detecting the changes better and stuff like that. This is something to look into with a live reload. At least we have this capability that at least if you change something in the XML view or in the code, that this is properly then also reflected then in the application. So immediate reload then happen, then you see that. But for sure, that's not hot module reload. That's a different thing. It's live reload.
We are at the top of the hour. This means that we actually would need to close for today. So big thank you to you, Peter, that you presented this here once again, and also special thank you to Holger. It's always great to see what you are doing, and thanks for sharing this with us and also with the community. Highly appreciated.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah. And yeah, this brings me maybe to the last topic. So we are always looking for topics for our next episode. So if you have any topic that you would like to discuss with us and or with the community, reach out to us, find us in the community, and we are more than happy to tackle this then, no? It's always good to know what's in your mind and where you need further information or some hints from us. And yeah, then I guess it's time to say goodbye. Exactly so. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.